Betty and Rick Lyden drove us from Trenton, New Jersey, back to Storm Lake, Iowa.
And that was you and Till.
Till and myself, Betty and Rick, and they had a little boy, David. So we drove, and Betty and Rick would change off driving, but we slept in the car. We didn't stop in a motel or anything like that. We drove all the way. And
do you remember, was it a full day's drive, or was it a 2-day drive?
oh my gosh, it had to be 2 days. That's a long way. Anyway, we got to Storm Lake, and that big house that my family had, there was an apartment in the back of it, and there's a mattress there, bed. So Till and I slept there, and then the bedroom that Till and I had growing up, Betty and Rick and David slept there. So anyway, Storm Lake doesn't have anything interesting, except it was, I think, high grade at the time.
Okay.
And your dad had worked there before, when it was Kingman, before he went into the Air Force. So he was able to get his seniority back, since he went into the military. So anyway, that was one of the things that we could show Betty and Rick, that whoopee-ding, we got this great industry here.
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse. So we went over there, and I hadn't seen your dad, Ron, and there he was there with, working in the casing room with my brother John, and he said, well, why haven't you called me? And I said, if I called you, my brothers would skin me alive. You don't call boys.
Women don't call men.
So anyway, that's when we started, he would come over, and I would go over to his folks and play cards and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Betty and Rick left to go back to New Jersey. And there we were from January, I think it was Valentine's Day that he asked my parents permission, and then he had Till go to Paxton's Jewelry to pick out a ring that I liked, and I did. I picked out one, and when he asked me to marry him, I couldn't believe that he had that ring. But that's how he did it.
Clever. He's a clever man.
So anyway, then we went to the priest and the rectory, and you have to prove that you're baptized and blah, blah. So his name was at the top of the baptism record book, and mine was down at the bottom.
Really? Okay.
So
baptized in the same church.
Baptized, but he went to Jackson when he was 4 years old.
Okay, Jackson, Minnesota.
Yeah. So his first penance, Holy Communion, and confirmation were in other places. But mine was all there in Storm Lake. And then we picked out June 23rd, is that?
Yep,
I think that's when we got married. And so we got married. And then he had 3 jobs. He had the high grade or Keegan or whatever it was at that time, and the Des Moines Sunday Rural Route newspaper route. And then he had a filling station job because he wanted to be an electrical engineer. So he was working, and putting all this money in the bank so he would have money for tuition. And then we ended up buying a mobile home, and we lived in that apartment behind Dick's house, Dick and the family house. We lived there, and when we bought the trailer, we moved into that, and it was across from the lake, right across the highway from the lake, in that trailer park. And then from there, they sold that trailer park, and then we moved up behind the KC Hall, because there was a hookup back there. And the guy rented it to us for $10 a month if we would mow the grass.
Okay.
So we're, not spending a whole bunch of money. And we had Mary Rose. She was born in August. And then we just kept working and, just doing whatever you do every day to live. And then it got to be December. I was pregnant with Teresa, and we were living in, how was that anyway? I think we had moved our trailer to Ames, and I didn't really like the doctor that I was going to, so we went back to Storm Lake for Christmas, and she was born January 10th, but in Storm Lake, at the same hospital Mary was born in. And then, it was just 4 years of college from then on out. And then from there, we went to Washington State because, I'll back up a little bit. He had a couple of interviews up here in Minnesota. And this is when it was slushy, and he got caught in the slush and hit the bridge and flipped over into the little creek that was running. But it totaled out our car. We had no car. And he broke his heel, he had stitches all over, but the miracle of that was that he crawled up out of the ditch or wherever he was in, and got up to the highway, and nobody would stop. Pretty soon somebody stopped that had a station wagon, and they brought him into this little town, and lo and behold, there was a doctor in this doctor's office, and he said he never comes in on a Sunday, never, ever, ever. But he was there, and he stitched him up. He couldn't do anything about his ankle or his heel because it was too swollen. So anyway, he called his dad and his folks, and they came and got him and brought him the next day. That was the only day that he ever missed school when he went to college. One day. So anyway, when he graduated, he was on crutches. But the next week or so after this accident, Dick and my brother John took Ron to a used car place and got a station wagon. Dick paid for it, and John bought the registration and everything, and all that. And that's what we used to get to Washington State. But before we got to Washington State, we stopped in Auburn, California, where my brother Joe lived, and we stayed with them a couple of days because we knew that our trailer wouldn't be in Washington. You know, it would take a while to get that trailer there. But Boeing paid to move us there and gave us money for the trip. So anyway, we stayed with Joe and Alice for a few days. We had 3 children. They had 3 children. And we drove through whatever it is between California and Seattle. What's that state?
Oregon?
Oregon, yeah. And the trailer was not there yet, so we stayed in a motel. But in the meantime, I forgot to say that my dad came along with us, and he stayed with Joe and Alice. He didn't come with us. So anyway, we moved into our trailer. All you do when you move a trailer is stuff pillows in the cupboards and put some tape on there, and then all you have to do is take the pillows out, your dishes are there, everything is there. So it wasn't any big deal to move in. So anyway, we were all set. And he started work the next day. So that's...
Seems like a pretty easy move.
And then...
And that was your first trailer still? That was the one that you bought
That was
in Iowa.
that one trailer, the only trailer that, mobile home.
Right, and it was mobile.
Yep, it was mobilized. Anyway, then, he didn't work very long in this big complex because he hated it. For one thing, he didn't like to be inside in a cubicle. So his friend, he met this Gordon Hatch, and Gordon was going to go out into the field working with a Minuteman missile. So your dad asked him to, speak for him, and lo and behold, they hired him. And
this is still for Boeing?
This was Boeing, yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't long after that we moved in we sold our trailer. We paid $3,500 for it. We sold it for $2,500 after living in it for almost a half year, six and a half years.
That's not a bad deal.
So we were able to pay off the car and the final tuition. We were only in arrears for 1 quarter when he graduated, that we had to pay that tuition. So we get into these huger trailers. So they were big, 3-bedroom and a big living room with a pull-out thing, big kitchen. Oh my gosh, it was great.
This was a trailer provided by Boeing in South Dakota?
There were 150 of them, and everybody worked for the Minuteman missile.
Okay. And Dad did security? Is that what they hired him to do?
That he was in security, yeah. Yep. And he loved it, and then that phased out, and then we moved to Sedalia.
For Boeing, or was that one for...
With Boeing.
Okay.
And then a year later, that phased out, but he got a job with Sylvania.
Uh-huh.
Well, we had to live in this brown house. I don't know if you remember it.
I do. So that was back in South Dakota.
No, that was in Sedalia.
Oh, so Sedalia, he worked for both Boeing and Sylvania.
Yep.
Okay.
But we had to move into that house because Boeing was in charge of all those trailers, and they phased out of it. So we were with Sedalia for a year, and then Paul was born, just a baby, and we moved to Rapid City in Nathan Court.
Okay, and that was still with Sylvania?
Yep.
What was he doing
He was doing the same thing.
So security again.
Security.
Okay.
Yep. But he loved it. He loved, being able to travel and being out in the open. And
So I would imagine that security involved him just going from each silo and just making sure that it was secure.
right, that's what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if a rabbit would set off a trap that would go to headquarters and say there's trouble out there, you go out there and it's a rabbit. But he wasn't able to talk to me about anything that he was doing because it was all security.
Right. It was classified.
Right. Yeah. So that's that. And then I just thought, we just can't keep moving and moving and moving on. Because I never did that when I was growing up, and he did move from, town to town. And I said, I don't think it's good for Mary especially, And so that's when he started looking for something else. He went to New York to apply for a job there. I didn't want to go to New York. And anyway, he ended up at IPS.
In Waterloo.
So that's our travels.
Do you remember what year was that? 1967 or 68 in Waterloo?
It could have been 67 because we were there 10 years. And Paul was, I think, 2 years old. So he was born in 65.
Well, that makes sense because I started kindergarten at Cresthaven.
Cresthaven.
So I would have been 5.
Yep.
In 68. So 67 makes sense.
Yep.
So we were in Waterloo for 10 years.
10 years.
Dad worked for Iowa Public Service all 10 years, and he was an electrical engineer.
Yep. They wanted him to move to Sioux City.
Okay.
And I did not want to go to Sioux City because I was already in a prayer group, and I had some relations with these people up here.
Okay.
With the servants of the light.
Yeah, that's what it was called back then.
Yep. So that's my history.
And then we basically was, instead of going to Sioux City, Dad decided to look at coming to Minnesota.
Right. Yep.
So that would have been in 1977, 76?
Probably 76, probably.
No, it would have
Yep.
been 77. 77 to 78.
Yep.
Yeah. So then he was hired on to be the director of public utility or electrical utilities at North St. Paul.
North St. Paul.
He worked there from end of 77, or probably the fall of 77, until he retired when he was 67 years old.
He was 66 when he retired.
66? Do you remember? So that would have been 80.
I have to have a paper to figure it out. Write it out on a paper.
Okay. So then he retired from North St. Paul, and then in 2004, you sold your house in Maplewood.
Yeah.
And that's when you started living with different people.
Yeah.
So you lived with, you had the fifth wheel camper.
Yep.
And you moved that to Ham Lake, is that where?
Ham Lake, Ham Lake Resort or Ham Lake campgrounds.
Okay, and you lived in the camper during the summer, and then the first winter, I believe you lived with Cece?
Cece, yep.
And then after that first winter, you went back to the campgrounds.
Campgrounds, yep.
And then after that, I think the next year, did you live with Mary one winter? Does that sound right?
Oh, we lived with her for a little while.
Because you moved in to my place in, I think it was in 2006. So I believe you were staying with Mary while I was finishing the basement.
Yep.
And then once I finished the basement, you guys moved in.
And how long were we with you?
I think it was a year and a half.
Year and a half, okay.
And then after that, so it would have been in the end of 97, I'm sorry, 07, you would have moved in with Mark and Sonia.
And we were there 8 years.
You were there for 8 years, and then after that, then you moved into where you are now, in Coon Rapids, at Epiphany Pines.
Yeah.
So that would have been in 15? Is that when you moved here, the end of 15? Does that sound right? I think that's when you moved here.
15? 2015?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the story of my life.
Yeah. Most of it, we missed I didn't start recording it when you talked about high school in Omaha and New Jersey, but hopefully we can get that on film the next time I come over. But I mean, that's a very interesting life, Mom, for someone who grew up, born and raised in Storm Lake.
Yeah.
It didn't. I mean, your world was so small. That's kind of how we started this topic, is how small your world was. How small
the world, yeah.
Everything was, and the church was, a couple blocks away. And
Yep.
if you went to the next town, that was 5 miles. And if you went to the grotto, which was really far away, that was like an hour.
Oh my gosh, a whole hour. In that old jalopy that my dad had, it must have been a Model T or something. And I mean, we would drive a few miles and get a flat tire, and he'd have to get his patchy stuff out, and he'd tell us to get away from the car, because I don't want that jack to come down on me.
Oh, that's smart. That's prudent advice.
But he did it, because Madeline worked she worked for this family that had 11 children, the McGuires, and what was the name of the town? I can't remember, but it was on the other side of the grotto, so probably north of the grotto.
Okay.
I mean, we would drive through that town when we would go to the grotto from up here, but I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, Madeline would invite us to come on a Sunday for dinner, and it was always a big chicken dinner. Oh, wonderful, wonderful food. But these people were quite well, I don't know wealthy, but they had a farm and 11 children.
Oh,
and
wow.
she was a farmhand, nanny kind of that kind of a job. So anyway, but my dad would just keep patching those tires during the war, and you couldn't buy tires.
He must have had a tire pump in his car.
Yep, he did.
It was part of the patch kit.
Yep.
Pump up the tire, the tube.
Yep. But you couldn't buy tires. You couldn't buy tubes. You just have one great big patched tube.
It's not a tube anymore. It's a patch.
But anyway, and then this car we had, no air conditioner.
Of course not.
The air conditioning was when you put the windshield.
Oh, you flipped the windshield out.
We flipped it out.
Oh.
And then he'd say, "Keep your mouth shut, you're going to get full of dust."
Dust and bugs. Oh my goodness. Back in the good old days.
Oh, back in the good old days, you were just dirty all the time.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
It's funny, I think about the good old days for me and how, like for instance, when we moved to Waterloo, one of the first things you guys did is you bought a brand new car. And you bought the 1968 Ford Country Squire station wagon.
Was that the one that turned into the Bullet?
That was the one that became the Bullet.
Okay.
Yes. And I mean, it was a beautiful car, and it had seating for like 12.
Yep.
And the back seats, the back seats were, they popped up and they faced each other. and there was seating for four.
Yeah.
And we used to think that was so neat, but I think there were seat belts back there.
I don't remember seat belts because that's the car that this semi
He sideswiped you.
Sideswiped me, and my babies were in the back seat and they weren't buckled in.
They weren't buckled in.
No, I just thought, oh my gosh, because that's all I could think of when I felt that,
Yeah.
it was a semi, it was his trailer that.
And that was a hit and run. He bumped you and just kept going.
He kept going. I mean, he didn't know that he did it.
And
And I didn't know what color it was.
Sure.
The policeman asked me, well, what color truck was it? I don't know. And I was worried about my babies in the back, Cece and John were in the back.
Right. And I think that accident is what kind of started the whole process of that station wagon becoming the Bullet.
Yep. Because it ripped off the paneling.
Yep. It had fake paneling with a trim piece that went around it, and
Yep.
the semi ruined a lot of that. So Dad decided to
Just leave it.
Well, what he did was he took all the trim off, and then he removed the vinyl paneling paper, whatever
Yeah,
you
okay.
want to call it. And he did it on both sides.
Oh, okay.
And then he brought it in and had it repainted. And then after that, he just never got around to putting the trim back on. And then the car had all those holes from the trim. And that's where Teresa and her friends came up with the term, the name Bullet. Which is so funny.
It is.
It's such an appropriate name
I'm
for a
glad that he didn't fix it up because now we got something to joke about.
Right, yeah. But that car was in, I think, 2 accidents, because I remember there was another one where you picked us all up from school, and we were driving home, and it was over by West High School. And actually, matter of fact, I think it was right in front of the cook's house, where a car darted out in front of you. Basically, what happened is the guy stopped at a stop sign and then just went through, and you slammed on the brakes and hit him.
I was rear-ended.
Oh, you were rear-ended too?
Yep, I was rear-ended coming out of Columbus's driveway.
Sure.
And I was side hit. Maybe that's the one you're talking about.
The one I'm talking about was the priest that we were coming home from St. Ed's, and I remember you slammed on your brakes, and I remember this because I distinctly remember this because I don't think any of us were wearing seatbelts, and we all went forward, and there wasn't much damage, but so that car had 3 accidents.
Yep. But that guy didn't want me to report it. He said he would pay for the damages out of his pocket. He didn't want me to report it.
All right.
So, yeah.
So interestingly enough, so Dad actually gave that car away. I think when he bought did we buy the Vega in Iowa? Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I think so.
So when he bought the Vega, that was in '76. So at that point in time, he just gave the Bullet away
to a school to fix it up or something.
Right.
So that, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're reliving our past.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what you. But I just I guess the thing that I forgot to bring up with that station wagon is the station wagon was good because it was big enough for you to bring kids to school. So in the morning, for instance, so we had bus services at St. Ed's for a couple of years.
For a while,
and
yeah.
They canceled that, so then it was a matter of, okay, we have to carpool. And you would bring a bunch of kids to school, a bunch of the neighborhood kids.
Yep.
And I remember in the wintertime, you'd start that car up, and it had a big 390 cubic inch engine, and it was freezing, and you didn't have heat, until there was a light, an idiot light that was blue and it said cold, and you wouldn't turn the heater on until that light went out because it didn't make sense to blow cold air. And I remember as we were driving to school, which was only a mile away, by the way.
Yep.
We would just shiver in the car and just stare at that little blue light. And as soon as it went on, turn it on.
Oh,
and you turn the heater on.
Oh.
So probably like 2 blocks before we got to school, we had heat.
Got heat. Oh gosh.
But yeah,
No, that's when I was doing childcare for P.J. Troop and Kay Ann Dreckman, and then I had a little guy named David, and I had one of your dad's co-workers, 2 daughters.
Okay.
For a little while in the afternoon.
So the PJ Troop one, that would explain why we carpooled sometimes with the troops. So PJ's dad would drop PJ off and you'd watch him while he brought us to school.
Okay, yep.
But I don't remember, I remember him driving occasionally, but not that often. Matter of fact, I vaguely remember anyone else driving.
I think I drove every day.
Yeah, that's what I recall as well. You did most of the driving.
Yep.
But I remember the Theses and the Kavanaughs would ride with us,
and then
the troops. And
then that gal that lived on the other side of Brown.
Yeah, I forget her name now.
Mary something. And wasn't there somebody across the street too?
Yeah, the Hesses. I forgot her name. Something Hesse, Dawn Hesse. I don't know.
Yeah.
But do you think about it, Mom? You took care of a lot of kids. Your own?
I sure did. I think wasn't there 11 at one time in there, or
probably.
was that in the what's that little bitty thing that we had?
The Vega.
No.
The slug bug, the VW.
Yeah, the slug bug. Yeah. How many did we get in there?
So the slug bug, if you remember, I remember that one because I remember I was really young, and we had it when we moved from South Dakota to Waterloo. But I remember that car. The station wagon must have replaced the VW because I remember when the station wagon was brand new, you guys got that car and then somebody came and picked up the VW. So that was. But in that car, I remember there would be Mary, Teresa, Mark, myself, and Paul. And Paul and I would sit in the boot in the back, and Mary, Teresa, and Mark would be in the middle. So 5 kids. Well, you could put 5 kids and 2 adults in that.
Yep.
As long as the kids in the boot were little.
As long as they were little,
and there was no seatbelt back there.
No seatbelts, and oh my gosh, I'd be nursing the baby while I'm driving the car.
Wow.
I mean, we had to have angels around us all the time. No kidding, because we were vulnerable to accidents.
Well, you think about modern safety nowadays with car seats and infant seats and seat belts. It's just stuff like that doesn't really happen. There is no boot for kids to go climb in when you get in the car.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah.
That's interesting.
We had lots of adventures.